Hello everybody, welcome to the art of Gore and other messy stuff. We've used resident French Radji, who had the indecency to arrive late from work today. I wanted to make this lecture for some time now because I'm sure you're aware, those of you from Void, that I'm a very big fan of Gore and violent comics in general. And I will now bestow upon you my knowledge. Uh, this video and this lecture is not safe for work, so if you are watching it at work, be very discretion is advised. If you're if you are a kid, what the fuck are you doing here? Go away. Go sleep. So I will not. We will not go into subject in any particular order. I will first give you the tips for the easy way to suggest or make gory imagery on your comics. After that, we will see in details the skills and the knowledge you must have to make effective use of gore. And one thing you will have to know, and I think it is obvious if you had dabbled in comics before, is that to make good effective gore you have to be good at anatomy. Everything about gore is about knowing how the human body works so that you can adapt it for your comics. Why, for example, those a decapitated head, a decapitation makes so much blood? It is because of the vascular system. And knowing which part of the body bleed the most or bleed the least is somewhat tricky if you don't have the proper medical knowledge. Every wound to the head, for example, is very impressive. There's a lot of blood because there is a lot of capillaries in the skin under the skin of your head, because this is the place where your brain resides. If a character is hit to the head, no matter the place, it will bleed a lot. There is something to know because it can be used for shock value. The vascularies of the human body in the neck area are concentrated on the sides. And if you take a human body and you look where the biggest capillaries, where the most irrigated places are, you will see a pattern. I will show you a rudimentary image of a human body so that you can understand. In the human body, the most important organs are the most irrigated. That means that there is a lot of veins and arteries in the neck, in the head, all along the facial muscles. There is a lot of blood there, pressurized blood. In the arm, in particular, in the inside of the arm, in the fingers, there is a lot of blood in circulation in the center of your body, in the inside of your legs too. Meaning that if your character is wounded in those certain places I'm going to show you, he will not bleed the same. If your character is wounded on the shoulder, there will be a bit of blood. But the majority of the arteries and veins going to the arm is under the armpit, for example. Then traveling right along the biceps, then in the forearms. If you look in the inside of your forearms, especially in the joint of your wrist, you can see the veins and arteries. If you go to the leg, it goes like this. There's a lot of blood in the inside of the thigh, then around the knee, then behind the foreleg, then all around the feet. There's a lot of blood on the side in the abdominal area. That's because there is the liver, there is the intestines. It's very important stuff and it must be irrigated. If I had to color the zones to know which parts of the human body bleed the most, it would look a bit like this. The head completely, the neck, the armpit, the inside of the arm, the hand, the center, the sides, then the lower abdominal area, the inside of the thigh, the knees, behind the forelegs, the feet. In the back is more or less the same, except because there is a lot of muscle and not a lot of organs in your back. There will not be a lot of bleeding except in the small of your back, because this is where your kidneys are located. We will keep our test subject there for a moment. Let's make him a bit smaller. And I will give you some more examples. The wounds are different in any situation. Blunt force don't make the same kinds of injuries as slicing weapons. Slicing weapons don't make the same sort of injuries as firearms, gunshot weapons, for example. Blunt force mostly affect the capillaries, the smaller veins under your skin, and make bruises when you are hit. The skin begin to swell and become blue because the blood escaped the vascularies and capillaries. I'm sure you're familiar with the phenomenon. When someone hit in the eye, for example, the eye is a very important organ and very fragile. That's why the area around the eye will swell a lot to protect the eye if it's hit. A swollen eye is a bit difficult to draw, but you have to remember that it's not the eyeball itself that is swollen, it's the eyelids and the flesh around it. There is still an eye under that, but it's a closed eyelid who is shut by the swelling of blood. That is why you have to remember how to draw your eyelids. The eyelids are the base size of the eyelids are in the orbit of your eye, but it have to be more swollen. It more or less look like a coffee bean. A coffee bean with bruises around it. Sometimes if you eat hard enough, there will be a bit of blood who can trickle down the eye. But if your character is hit in the eye, he will most of the time looks like this. Eventually, they can also be swelling around it a bit more. But that's a bad sign because that would mean that the bone under it is broken. Swellings is not only because the blood is escaping the smaller veins and smaller arteries in your body. It's apply a pressure on your wound so that small fragments of bones, for example, will not go away around in your body when you're hurt and injured. You must remember that the human body is a complex and well-made machine. It has safety measures to keep you alive if you're hurt. That's why, for example, if your character was hit so hard in the jaw that it's broken, or it's very damaged, it also is a swelling because under it there is the jawbone with your teeth in it, and there is a lot of blood going on in this area. The swelling most of the time start where the cheekbone is, because there is vein under the cheekbones but not on it. All this area under the cheekbones between the cheekbones and the chin is where the swelling will occur if your character is hit in the jaw, in the cheek, and the jaw is broken. Once again, the swelling of the lips, the swelling of his mouth is so that you are discouraged by your own body to open your mouth if you're hurt there, so that you do not aggravate the wound. A hit here. Some of you may have watched pro wrestling, the WWE. Wrestler and fighters in the UFC and other mixed martial arts and martial art in general often get hit in the ear, and the ear is not is very fragile. It's mostly cartilage with some blood in it. If your ear if the ear is hit hard enough, the cartilage might rupture, but it can form itself very quickly again, can heal. Something that is very hard to heal in your ears is the veins. They get clogged if they get ruptured in your ears, causing a swelling known as the cauliflower ear. Someone who is a fighter, a wrestler, someone who get hit in the side of the head often can have ears that look like that. They're swollen all the time because it's essentially the same phenomenon as the old people with vascular system that doesn't work very well with old age. Okay, right now our character look very hurt, but it's about to get worse. Broken nose. Of course, you know you can have a bleeding nose if it's too hot, or if you pick your nose, or if you were drinking with a straw and someone hit you in the back of the head of the straw and pat itself in your nose. I don't know. I don't know if it have ever happened to you, but if you get hit in the nose, same as your ear, the nose is mostly made of cartilage. There is only the base of your nose who is made of bone. Under it there is the nasal cavity. There is few bone to break here. It's mostly cartilage, meaning that if someone hit the nose very hard, he can break it, but it's not bone, it's a cartilage, meaning it can be bent. If your nose is hit, it will bleed, always. And a broken nose can have a lot of different form because as it is cartilage, it is not solid. It can break in multiple places. I have seen in my years fighting karate in my old town a number of people who has their nose completely bent to a side because they got hit very violently in it. Sometimes in the most extreme case you can also break the skin of your nose where the bone and the cartilage meet. Okay, at this point our character is very much messed up. He's crying. For the rest of the body, you have to apply the same rules. If you're for the hand, for example, there is a lot of veins and capillary in your hand and fingers, but there is no muscles in your hand. There is no muscles in your fingers. Nothing. It's just your bones, blood, your skin, and most importantly, the tendons. When you hurt your finger, they will always swell to protect your bones and your joints. Let's imagine that you were hitting the finger very hard, and some bones or some bone got disjointed. The finger will swell. The hand itself will swell. To protect your bones, to protect what allow you to interact with the world. But the tip of your finger will very rarely swell because there is absolutely nothing at the tips of your finger aside from very thick skin, nails. You can bleed a lot from your hand because there is a lot of important arteries and veins who stop there. But most of the time, you have ever a swollen hand, or in the case of someone who just got in the fight. I'm sure you maybe if you saw a classic X-Men movie with Wolverine, most of the time there would be bruises at the joints and the knuckles. The bruises are the are a visual indication that you just hit what is essentially bare bones covered by skin on something very hard. So the capillaries under the skin of your finger will break very easily if you hit hard enough. And so it will be very red very quickly. That was about the superficial injuries. We will keep your head here for the next demonstration. Now we will speak about the slicing weapons. Before we go around cutting heads in half, chopping off arms and legs and the fun stuff, you must know what a bladed weapon will do in terms of bleeding on a human body. As I said before, because your head is very important for your body, there is a lot of veins, there's a lot of arteries, so it will rupture, and there is a lot of a real lot of pressurized blood that will erupt. If someone get a cut in the temple, for example, it will bleed a lot and very rapidly. It's the same for the ears, the same for the nose. That's why a nosebleed is very annoying to take care of, because there's a lot of blood in your head. And if there's a tiny escape, it will take it, as all liquids. Remember this rule. If you're hit in the head, you will bleed a lot, whatever happens. If you remember our little friend here, that is all the zones where you bleed a lot if you hit. As I said, there is two kind of wounds with a lot of bleeding involved. Three, if you want to go all the ways. The blunt force trauma will sometimes rupture your skin and break your bones. It will be very localized bleeding, very small wounds. Sometimes it's the bones who puncture your skin. So it's a lot of blood that flow from very small exact wound. Circular wound most of the time. The blood will river down. It's like a river, really like a river. When it's small puncture wounds or big puncture wounds, our friend here is shot in the head. Bam! There's a hole in his head. The blood will at first, because it's the head, squirt out a bit, like this, but most of the time it will trickle down like a river. That's because the wound is circular. If it's sliced, the blood will escape the body following the cut. If you cut here in your hand, it will be a lot of blood following a line. There is no blood trickling above this line. The only exception if your character was hurt before and suddenly his hand is upside down. The blood that did not coagulate will begin to trickle down. Something that you must know about blood is that your body will try to stop losing blood. Meaning that it will not bleed too long. Maybe it will be, if the wound is severe enough, you will bleed to death. But if your body can recover, it will close the wound by itself. That's why there is not a big puddle of blood when you're hit by a weapon, unless the injury is very grievous, because the blood will coagulate. This is why, in the case of injury, even with the gunshot wound, there is rarely blood that goes all the way down the body. I'd say with the case of a gunshot wound like that, for example, it will stop at your torso. Maybe the clothes will absorb the blood. When your character is hurt, I imagine that he's not, most of the time he's wearing clothes. He's not buck naked in the streets. When you are hurt, a part of the blood will be soaked up your clothes. It will spread, and I call it the oil spread. That's like if you put a bit of oil on your counter, and that you took a paper tissue, and that you try to sponge it up. It spread to an extent, but it doesn't go everywhere. But again, except if the wound is very grievous. In the case of a gunshot wound, if your brain is hit, you die very quickly, and your heart will stop bleeding very quickly. So the blood will stop pumping very quickly. That's why there is a limited amount of blood that will be visible on your body, on the body of your character, if you are hurt. But this is something to remember. If your character is hurt and that is wearing clothes, and if there is a way the clothes are close to the wound, they will be soaked in blood. Okay, next. Let's for the most graphic and extreme ways for a body to be hurt, there is a lot of ways. You could be burning with acid, you could be melted down with fire, you could be squished against a wall. In those situations with the most extreme wounds, you have to remember again how a human body works, and what example you can take for inspiration. Let's take the case. For example, we will take the someone who gets his head blasted off. In this case, you have to know how his skull will behave under pressure, how his brain will behave, the blood and the body. When you are hit in the head, let's say here, when you are hit in the head will, like a punching ball, go to the opposite direction. That is something to remember. So your head goes this way. That means the body is thrown off the axis this way. Maybe he was shot. In that case, it was a small projectile who hit his head. The impact and the violence made his head fly to the other side, and there will be mainly a lot of blood from this side of the head. Because as I said, from a puncture wound or a gunshot wound, the blood will escape the point of an entrance. Some blood will squirt out. And your body is swayed to one side. Maybe he was hit very violently and not shot. In that case, if he was hit with a baseball bat, there is no immediate effect on your body beside maybe a bit of blood if the hit was very violent, because he has a cut. But beyond that, there is not a lot. If the hit is extremely violent, so violent that it break his skull, we are now entering the level of goreness. That is the second level, I'd say. The skull of a human body has the same function as the crust of a watermelon. The hard stuff all around is so that the red, wet and soft stuff on the inside stay inside. If a gunshot wound, if the gunshot is of a very heavy caliber, for example, you will mainly see blood, a lot of blood, squirting, a lot of blood, who make a bit of a cloud at the point of impact. You have to remember this, that it's like when you have if you have a soccer ball and that you put it into the water, then you take it and you hit it with your hand. Some water will be splashed on you because you hit splashed water on contact. At the point of impact, there is blood squirted here, the most violent the impact, the more the body is sway to the other side. Blood has quit. You have to remember that to make it more impactful, you have to treat the body as if it was a puppet, a string puppet. You have to you have to exaggerate maybe a bit the motions so that it is more visible. So there is an impact here with a blood that we spray. There's a trail of blood, but the most blood is squirting here. If the hit is from a blunt weapon and it is violent enough, this is where the very messy stuff begin. It's inside of your brain, inside of the skull, sorry, inside of your skull is your brain. The brain is protected by the skull from impact, but if you break the skull, the brain gets exposed. One of my aunts working at the hospital in my hometown often said to me that the most gruesome wounds she ever saw in her career is that are the blunt force trauma on the head of people because most of the time it will bust your brain if your cranium get broken. Because the cranium is like a balloon. It's under pressure because it must keep the brain inside, because it must keep the blood inside. If you burst it open, it's like the water balloon. Or watermelon. If I have to use my earlier metaphor, it gets graphic very very quickly. The head of our poor character will burst open. There is small fragment. The inside gets exposed. You can see the brain. Maybe there's bit of brains flying. And blood, and lot of blood. A real lot of blood. As I said before, there is blood splashing at where there was the impact. Sometimes even an eye can be popped off the orbite. That is in the case of very heavy blunt force trauma to the head. You can easily imagine what would happen if you got sliced there. I'm sure you often saw in movies, in television series or video games, people getting their head cut off or their throat slit. There is a lot of blood. If someone get his head cut, they always get a split second to realize what happened to them. When you want to make it more impactful, you can show your character slowly realizing what happened to them just before they die. They froze up in their action. A decapitated head will take 1 second for the expression to freeze up, meaning that if the character knows what was happening to them, their facial expression will be frozen with a sense of realization, of fear, of anger. Let's say it was fear. Most of the time, the eyes will be rolled up in their skull because of rigor mortis. But the moment just after the decapitation, the eyes are blank. The blood will scrape very violently everywhere because, as I said before, the neck contained a lot of big and very important arteries. The head in itself will empty itself of its blood very quickly. So it goes like this: if someone is decapitated, there. If the shot you're drawing, the decapitation happened there can be not a lot of blood to show that it was too quick, but it the decapitation happened some seconds ago. As I said, the head itself will empty itself of its blood very quickly. The main body, it's a fountain of blood. Maybe it will already trickle down the body. The wounds to the torso and the lower abdomen are very dangerous for a human being because um, the torso is relatively protected by the rib cage, but it's not a perfect protection. But most of the time in a fight, the wound to the torso are bruises. To the side, it can be broken bones. So you already know what I said about broken bones. It's the swelling mostly. But if you get sliced to the belly, to the abdomen, that's where the fun stuff begin. The abdominal cavity is a balloon filled with guts. You have the rib cage here, the spine, and this area here has no natural protection. It's just skin and muscles keeping your guts inside. Normally, if you have some notions of anatomy, you know what are the organs found there. You have the liver, the lower parts of the lungs, the lower part of the heart, pancreas, the stomach, and the intestines. And all of this is the fun stuff we get to play with if there is wound in this area. Okay. I will not tell you how the character is behaving when they hurt, because it must be obvious to you. Killing over, trying to get the feelings inside. Maybe you saw this scene of Saving Private Ryan with the Operation Overload scene, where with the GI trying to hold his guts inside. I will tell you. I will tell you how the organs react when they escape their fleshy confines. In the case of a gunshot, most of the time the organs will stay inside, because when you are hurt by a gunshot, it's a very small piece of lead and very small projectiles piercing you. It will mostly be puncture wounds. But if your character is slices apart of if he gets tore apart, most of the time when someone gets sliced in the abdomen, the organs will very quickly fall from the confine. And it depends on the wound. There is a lot of blood, but there is the guts. And the secret to do good gore with guts is to make sure that there is a point where the organs and blood are not dissociated. By that I mean that you have your red for your blood. There, it's trickling down. As I said, the blood is following the wound, maybe a bit above of the line to show the splash effect. There, all the fun tomato juice is trickling down very quickly down the legs, down the abdomen, and they are our guts. The guts, most of the time, my technique is to put the color of the guts on the parts or clearly outside of the belly, but make sure that it gets a bit blurry when you are close to the wound itself. And that is if you use colors. You have to suggest. You have to suggest that the guts come from inside the wood by making the color of the guts get out of the red. If you are doing in white and black, as I often do, it is a bit more tricky, but there is a very simple way to do it. So there is your wound there. It's sliced. You have to accentuate some places so that you show that the guy is losing his guts. Okay, so dripping blood. What I will do is to play with how a gut is supposed to look like. Guts are also full of veins because it is a very important organ that needs constant irrigation so that it works as it is intended to. Which means that you have to make it trickly slimy. Guts are slimy. If you ever disassembled the chicken on your grandparents' farms, as I did when I was little, you'd know that the guts are slimy, tricky to handle because they're very slippery, but they're not wet to. No, they're not exactly wet. When you touch it, when you touch them, they're not bleeding. They bleed and there's other stuff leaking out of them only if they're hurt or sliced or damaged. If it's only gut spilling out of a wound, if it's only guts slipping out of a wound, they're, and I quote, clean. That means that they are covered in the blood of the wound, but they themselves are not damaged. So if you're not using colors to differentiate the blood and the guts, it is by the texture. Guts are covered in tiny veins. They are crinkly. They are not straight pipes. They are pipes with a lot of turns and nerves and they're not. The guts are not tubes like you see in your house, like pipes. Maybe it will be more visible if I make it longer. If you let guts hang from the belly of your victim, you will notice that it does not spill. It does not spill on the ground as a big heap. Because, as I said, the human body is a well-made machine that is made to survive to your wounds. There is very thin membrane around your guts that keep them in place even when you hurt, meaning that when it spill over, when you disassembled, there's part of it that will stuck together because of this membrane, but it's very fragile and gravity can break it. That's why you can see a lot of gut wounds with a large concentration of guts hanging from the wound itself, and some who are that close to fall over. They are tricking blood, they're tricking other things. And once again, if you're coloring it, you must first color the blood of the wound. And then you have to color the guts themselves. And if you use the process, if you process it like I did, as I showed you, you will have a very convincing spilling of guts. It's the same if you are sliced to It is the same if you slice and the slice is so violent that your guts are spilt everywhere. It's like the gunshot wound to the head. Except that if you are so inclined to show it, the guts are filled with digested fluid, half digested food, or even shit if it's in the lower abdomen. It is not recommended to draw that part because one, it is very difficult to do it, and three, most of the time it does not add much to the drawing. But if you're drawing a slashing wound to the stomach, for example, from a sword, and then the guts are spilling everywhere, you have to remember this fact. Let me show you quickly. Look at this poor guy getting sliced. You have to follow the trade of the weapon who did the wound. So, as you see, like in the gunshot wound, there's a large concentration of blood to the impact, blood trailing where the weapon was. And there is the color of the guts. You don't really need to add more to that. Okay, now we will see when there is a wound and there is the bones involved. The bones are the main reason you stand up, because you are a vertebrate. The bones are the core of your body. The muscles are attached to it. Most of the membranes that encase your organs are attached to them. Let's say in the case of a sliced arm. Okay, we have a poor guy here. He got his arm sliced right there. You have to remember our friend here. There's a lot of blood coming from the armpit because there's veins going like this. There's some veins from his back coming there. A vein coming that could come back from the brain. Okay, I'm here. The arteries and veins are where the blood squirt out of, but there is also the bone, as I said. You have to, most of the time, to for slice wounds, um, the point of impact with the blade follow the curve of the flesh. Let's say that the bone is about right there. Again with the blood. The blood is mainly squirting from where the arteries are from. The bone is here. And yes, it does look a bit like a ham. That's a very simple way to do, because if you want it to be more accurate, you can also remember that a bone is filled with marrow, meaning that it's all in the inside. You can also begin to suggest the sinew of the different bones. The muscles also will get cut. We will keep our friend here to show you what it looks like to get about half of his head cancelled. So there's a lot of place with a lot of blood who gets sliced off. His nose, his eyes, his ears. You have to remember that the skull is hollow once again, and then there is the brain. Let's say that the heat came from here. I'm going to speed up because it's already almost 1 hour, so I want to do that wound, then the next. You have your blood, as always. You take the brain, skull. If you have a wound to the head and that there is the brain, you can also draw the sinew of the brain. It's really not necessary, but most of the time it adds some more realism to the thing. And for the third wound, the wound with the bones and the guts. I will not dwell upon the tearing wounds because it is very simple. I will do it at the very end. Okay, goes this way. There's a lot of things getting cut here. First off, there's his spine. Maybe some of his ribs. Then there is all the place where the guts will come from and be spilled from. And you know the song at this point. There's the blood. Then the guts. And the bones. Remember all the time that blood is a liquid. You have to treat it as if you were drawing liquid, only it's red. And to conclude our lecture on Gore, I will quickly go over the tearing wounds because it's some of the most impressive wounds, but it's not something that happens that very often in reality, except in very specific case. In one of my in my entry for the Lightspeed Dev tournament on page 1, panel number 4, I drew a right-hand man tearing a prisoner in half. I will recreate what I drew to show you how it's made. Maybe a bit bigger. Okay. When someone is getting teared in half, especially when it's the mixed section that is getting teared, it is like it's as if you took a sausage and you snapped it in half. You have to remember that there's a skin getting burst, but not too burst. You have to remember that it is being torn. Sometimes bones are taken out of places. We can show that. The guts are being spelt. It's really the tearing wounds are an application of all the things I told you until then. the blood. In the case of wound by tearing, the blood behave a bit different from what I told you a moment ago. It's spilled from both directions. That's why it's a bit more messy to draw it, because the pressured blood goes squirt from both sides of the wound. Tearing songs are also very very dramatic, very impressive, but it's also it's the messier of all wounds. There is a shock value in it. Okay. Normally, if you with what I showed you today, you now have the tools to greatly improve your Gore game. You have to remember the essentials. Your organs are sausage, filled with half liquid things and behave like sausage. They spill when they're free from their containment. They are affected by gravity, they will always go down. Your organs are going down. Your blood is under pressure. Under pressure. The blood is under pressure, so it will squirt and splash, and it will behave differently with the kind of wound it affects. You have to remember the zone of the human body where the blood will squirt the most violently, and you have to remember that all those guts and muscles that get sliced, punched through and teared apart are contained in skin that behave like a water balloon or the crust of a watermelon, and that this skin can get damaged, and when this skin is damaged and the muscles are damaged, they swell to protect what is inside and stop you from moving too much. Okay, and when you and your contrary to what I just draw, your character have claws, and the claws get soaked in blood in case of injuries. And so it will conclude my lecture on gore and blood. I hope you learned some things today. And I don't know yet which kind of lecture I will try to make the next time, but I will think on it. Thank you all for listening. I'm tuning out.